He knelt, right there, in the middle of the bustling restaurant, the clinking of cutlery and hushed conversations fading into a blurry background hum. A spotlight, it felt like, though there wasn't one, focused solely on us. Around us, faces, familiar and unfamiliar, turned, smiles blooming like sudden flowers in a garden. He was holding a velvet box, a deep, rich burgundy that clashed ridiculously with the pastel tablecloth, but somehow, in that moment, it was perfect. His eyes, usually crinkled at the corners with easy laughter, were serious, earnest, almost pleading. He was saying words, beautiful words, words about forever and always and a love that transcended everything. Words I should have been thrilled to hear, words I had dreamed of hearing once. But beneath the surface of the fairy tale proposal, a cold dread was unfurling inside me, tendrils of ice wrapping around my heart, because I knew what they didn't. I knew the dark secret that lurked beneath the charming facade, the secret that made those beautiful words taste like ash in my mouth. He finished his speech, his voice thick with emotion, and opened the box. A diamond, glittering under the restaurant's warm lights, winked up at me. It was perfect, flawlessly cut, probably worth more than my entire year's salary. Another detail designed to impress, to dazzle, to blind. And everyone was watching, waiting, their smiles expectant, encouraging. My parents, beaming from a nearby table, his parents, equally delighted, friends, colleagues, even a few curious strangers. A whole audience for this grand, romantic gesture. Trapped. That's what I felt. Trapped in a gilded cage of expectations, of appearances, of a life that was being meticulously constructed around me, brick by painful brick, without my true consent. He was waiting for my answer, his gaze fixed on mine, a flicker of something unreadable in their depths. Hope, anxiety, or something else entirely. Something colder, more calculating. I forced a smile, a brittle, fragile thing that felt like it might crack and shatter at any moment. The word yes hovered on my lips, trembling, almost escaping. It was the easy answer, the expected answer, the answer that would make everyone happy, everyone except me. But the secret was a weight in my chest, a dark stone pressing down, suffocating me. It wouldn't let me say yes. It wouldn't let me pretend. Not anymore. Not after what I knew. The silence stretched, thick and heavy, punctuated only by the nervous clinking of his fingernails against the velvet box. The smiles around us began to falter, the expectant excitement slowly morphing into confusion, then unease. His smile too wavered, the confident charm flickering, revealing a glimpse of something raw, something vulnerable, something dangerous. I looked at him, really looked at him, past the charming smile, past the expensive suit, past the carefully constructed image of the perfect fiancé. And I saw it, the darkness lurking just beneath the surface, the secret that had been growing between us, a poisonous vine strangling the life out of our relationship. It was time. It was time to break free. It was time to tell the truth. But the truth was a dangerous thing, sharp-edged and unpredictable. It could shatter everything, destroy everything we had built, everything we pretended to be. And yet, staying silent, living a lie, was no longer an option. The air crackled with unspoken tension. The smiles were gone now, replaced by a sea of questioning, concerned faces. He was still kneeling, still holding the ring, but the confidence had drained from his posture, replaced by a rigid stillness. He knew something was wrong. He could feel it in the air, in my silence, in the way my eyes refused to meet his. He knew, but he didn't know what I knew, and that was the difference. That was the power I held, the power of the secret, a secret that was about to explode, right there, in front of everyone. The restaurant air, thick with anticipation moments ago, now felt heavy, suffocating. The cheerful chatter had completely died down, replaced by a hushed, expectant silence. Every eye in the place was fixed on us, a collective audience holding its breath. He remained kneeling, frozen in place, the velvet box still open, the diamond sparkling mockingly in the tense atmosphere. His face, once flushed with romantic fervor, was now pale, etched with a growing anxiety. The charming smile had completely vanished, replaced by a tight, strained expression. He was starting to sweat. I could see the faint sheen on his forehead, the way his Adam's apple bobbed nervously. He opened his mouth to speak, to say something, anything, to break the suffocating silence. But no words came out. He just stared at me, his eyes wide, searching, pleading. And in that moment, I saw a flicker of fear in them, a genuine, raw fear that was far more revealing than any carefully constructed facade. It was the fear of exposure, the fear of his carefully built world crumbling around him, the fear of me, because I knew, and he knew that I knew. The unspoken knowledge hung between us, a palpable weight pressing down on us both. My parents, usually so warm and supportive, looked on with bewildered concern. His parents, their faces flushed with embarrassment and confusion, exchanged worried glances. Our friends, a mix of shared acquaintances and his own close circle, were a sea of perplexed expressions. They had all come here to celebrate, to witness a joyous occasion. And instead, they were witnessing a silent, agonizing standoff. The romantic dinner had transformed into a public spectacle, a stage for a drama they didn't understand, but instinctively sensed was deeply wrong. I took a breath, a deep, shaky breath that did little to calm the storm raging inside me. My heart was pounding against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat of fear and resolve. My hands were trembling, cold despite the warmth of the restaurant, but my gaze remained fixed on his, unwavering, refusing to break contact. He had brought this upon himself. He had orchestrated this public display, this grand romantic gesture, thinking it would force my hand, silence my doubts, bind me to him in front of an audience. He had underestimated me. He had underestimated the weight of the secret, the corrosive power of the truth. He had underestimated my resolve to break free. The silence stretched on, agonizingly long. It felt like an eternity, a moment suspended in time, pregnant with unspoken words and unresolved emotions. Finally, I spoke. My voice, when it came, was surprisingly calm, steady, even. It was a stark contrast to the turmoil within me, but I needed to be strong, to be clear, to be heard. No, I said. The single word hung in the air, sharp and clear, cutting through the silence like a knife. It was a small word, but it carried the weight of everything I knew, everything I had been hiding, everything I was about to reveal. No, I repeated, louder this time, stronger, more resolute. I can't. The word echoed in the sudden, stunned silence. Around us, a collective gasp rippled through the room. His face crumpled, the carefully constructed mask of charm and confidence finally shattering completely. He looked lost, confused. utterly devastated. But beneath the devastation, I saw something else. Something colder, harder. Something that sent a shiver of fear down my spine. Anger. It was just a flicker, a brief flash in his eyes, but it was there, and it was directed at me. The romantic proposal had just turned into a public rejection, and the secret was still unspoken, hanging heavy in the air, waiting to be unleashed. The stunned silence that followed my rejection was quickly replaced by a low murmur of confusion and speculation. He remained kneeling, the open ring box clutched in his trembling hand, his face a mask of disbelief and hurt. But I knew better. I knew the hurt was a performance, a carefully crafted act designed to elicit sympathy, to turn the tables, to make me the villain in this suddenly public drama. His eyes, still fixed on mine, were no longer pleading, but narrowed, calculating. The anger I had glimpsed earlier was now simmering beneath the surface, threatening to erupt. He stood up slowly, deliberately, his movements stiff and controlled. He closed the ring box with a sharp snap, the sound echoing loudly in the hushed restaurant. He slipped the box into his pocket, his gaze never leaving mine. "May I ask why?" he said, his voice low, dangerously soft. It was a performance, I knew it. The wounded fiancé, publicly humiliated, seeking answers, seeking closure. But there was an edge to his voice, a subtle threat that only I could hear, that only I could understand. He wasn't really asking for an explanation. He was demanding one. He was demanding that I justify my rejection, that I publicly dissect our relationship, that I expose myself to the scrutiny of the audience, while he maintained his carefully constructed image of the innocent victim. I took another deep breath, trying to steady my nerves. This was it, the moment of truth, the moment I had dreaded and anticipated in equal measure, the moment when the secret would finally be revealed. But I couldn't do it here, not in front of everyone, not in this public spectacle he had created. The secret was too dark, too personal, too damaging to be aired out in this crowded restaurant. I needed to control the narrative. I needed to choose the time and place. And I needed to protect myself. "Not here," I said, my voice still calm, but firm, unwavering. "We can talk about this later, in private." His eyes narrowed further. He knew what I was doing. He knew I was trying to postpone the confrontation, to regain control. He didn't like it. He wanted the drama to play out here and now, on his terms, in front of his audience. He wanted to shame me, to humiliate me, to make me regret my rejection. "No," he said, his voice hardening, losing the feigned softness. "We will talk about it now. You owe me an explanation. You owe everyone here an explanation." He gestured around the restaurant, encompassing the bewildered faces, the curious stares, the silent judgment. He was playing to the crowd, manipulating the situation, trying to force my hand. But I wouldn't let him. I wouldn't be bullied into revealing my secret on his terms. "I don't owe anyone anything," I said, my voice rising slightly but still controlled. "This is between us, and I will discuss it with you in private. Not here. Not now." I turned to my parents, their faces etched with worry and confusion. "Mom, Dad, I'm sorry," I said, my voice cracking slightly. "I need to go." I started to move, to push past the tables, to escape the suffocating atmosphere, the judging eyes, the suffocating weight of the secret. He grabbed my arm, his grip surprisingly strong, his fingers digging into my skin. "You're not going anywhere," he said, his voice low, menacing, the anger finally breaking through the surface. You're going to explain yourself. Right now. His grip tightened, painful. I looked at him, at his face, contorted with rage and humiliation, and I saw it then. The full extent of his darkness, the true nature of the secret he had been hiding. It wasn't just a secret anymore. It was a threat. And I knew in that moment that my life was in danger. His grip on my arm tightened, his nails digging into my skin. The anger in his eyes was no longer a flicker, but a raging fire, burning away the last vestiges of the charming facade. He was no longer the man I thought I knew, the man I had almost married. He was someone else entirely, someone darker, someone dangerous. "Let go of me," I said, my voice trembling, but still firm. "You're hurting me." He laughed, a short, harsh, humorless sound. "Hurting you? You think this hurts? You have no idea what hurt is." His words were chilling, laced with a venomous anger that sent a shiver of fear down my spine. Around us, the murmur of the restaurant had died down completely. Everyone was watching, their faces a mixture of shock and morbid curiosity. My parents were frozen, their eyes wide with alarm. His parents looked away, their faces flushed with shame and embarrassment. Our friends, once smiling and celebratory, now looked horrified, uncertain what to do. We were the center of attention, a public spectacle of a relationship imploding in real time, and the secret, the dark secret that had been simmering beneath the surface, was about to boil over. "Let go of me," I repeated, louder this time, my voice laced with a desperate edge. "Please." The plea in my voice seemed to fuel his anger. His grip tightened further, his fingers digging deeper into my arm. "You think 'please' is going to work now?" he sneered. "You think you can just say 'please' and walk away from this? After you humiliated me in front of everyone? After you ruined everything?" "I didn't ruin anything," I said, my voice rising to a shout. "You did. You ruined everything long ago." The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken meaning. He knew what I was talking about. He knew the secret, and he knew that I was about to expose it. His eyes narrowed, his face contorting with a mixture of rage and fear. "You wouldn't dare," he hissed, his voice low, threatening. "You wouldn't dare say anything." "Oh, wouldn't I?" I retorted, my voice shaking, but defiant. "You think you can control me? You think you can silence me? You think you can get away with everything you've done?" His grip loosened slightly, a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. He knew he was losing control. He knew that the carefully constructed facade was crumbling, exposing the darkness beneath. He knew that the secret was about to come out, and he was terrified. "What are you talking about?" he said, his voice suddenly softer, almost pleading. He was trying to backtrack, to regain control, to salvage the situation. But it was too late. The dam had broken. The secret was about to be unleashed. I looked around at the faces watching us, the shocked expressions, the morbid curiosity, the dawning realization that something terrible was happening. And I knew I couldn't stay silent any longer. Not for myself, not for anyone else. The truth had to be told. "Everyone," I said, my voice clear and strong, cutting through the hushed restaurant. "Everyone needs to know the truth about him." He lunged at me, his hand flying towards my mouth, trying to silence me, to stop me from speaking. But I was faster. I dodged his hand, stepping back, putting distance between us. And I spoke. My voice, amplified by adrenaline and desperation, rang out through the restaurant, revealing the dark secret that had been poisoning our relationship. A secret that had finally driven me to say no. "He's not who you think he is," I said, my voice trembling, but resolute. "He's a liar. He's a cheat, and he's been abusing me for months." The words hung in the air, shocking, raw, and utterly devastating. A collective gasp rippled through the restaurant. All eyes were fixed on us, wide with disbelief and horror. My parents, their faces pale and stricken, rushed towards me, their expressions a mixture of concern and dawning understanding. His parents, their faces buried in their hands, seemed to shrink in their chairs, overwhelmed by shame and mortification. Our friends, frozen moments ago, now stirred, their expressions shifting from shock to outrage. He stood there, paralyzed, his face ashen, his eyes wide with terror. The anger had vanished, replaced by a raw, naked fear that was far more revealing than any outburst of rage. He knew it was over. He knew that the secret was out, that the carefully constructed lie had been exposed. He knew that his world was about to crumble. "It's not true," he stammered, his voice weak, pathetic. "She's lying. She's just trying to hurt me because I rejected her." His attempt at denial was weak, unconvincing, and utterly transparent. No one believed him. The truth hung in the air, thick and heavy, impossible to ignore. My parents reached me, their arms wrapping around me in a protective embrace. "Are you okay?" my mother whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. "Are you hurt?" "I'm okay," I said, my voice still shaking, but stronger now, emboldened by the truth. "I'm finally okay." His friends, who had been silent witnesses moments ago, now started to stir, their expressions hardening with anger and disgust. One of them, a tall, muscular man who had always seemed to admire him, stepped forward, his face contorted with rage. "Is it true?" he demanded, his voice booming through the restaurant. "Is what she's saying true?" He didn't answer. He couldn't answer. His silence was an admission, a confirmation of the terrible truth. The tall man lunged at him, his fist clenched. "You son of a bitch!" he roared, his voice filled with fury. Chaos erupted. The restaurant, moments ago a scene of romantic anticipation, now descended into pandemonium. Chairs scraped against the floor, glasses shattered, voices shouted in anger and disbelief. His friends, once loyal and supportive, now turned on him, their faces filled with betrayal and disgust. His parents, still huddled in their chairs, wept openly, their dream of a perfect wedding dissolving into a nightmare. Waiters rushed forward, trying to restore order, to separate the fighting men, to calm the enraged patrons. But the chaos was unstoppable. The secret had been unleashed, and it had ripped through the carefully constructed facade, tearing apart everything in its path. I stood there, surrounded by my parents' protective embrace, watching the scene unfold. A wave of exhaustion washed over me, but beneath the exhaustion there was a sense of relief, of liberation. The truth was out. The secret was no longer mine to bear alone. And for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe again. The restaurant was in complete disarray, a scene of shattered glass, overturned tables, and shouting voices. But amidst the chaos, I felt a strange sense of peace. The nightmare was over. The truth had set me free. And as the police arrived, sirens wailing in the distance, I knew that my life was about to change, forever. But for the first time in a long time, I felt a flicker of hope. A hope for a future free from secrets, free from lies, free from abuse. A future where I could finally be myself, without fear, without shame, without the weight of a dark secret crushing my soul. The arrival of the police intensified the chaos, but also brought a semblance of order to the pandemonium. Sirens wailed outside as uniformed officers pushed their way through the crowded restaurant, their presence immediately commanding attention. The fighting subsided, the shouting diminished, and a tense, uneasy silence descended upon the room. All eyes turned to the police, then back to us, the central figures in this unfolding drama. My parents tightened their embrace, their protectiveness a tangible shield against the judging stares and the lingering tension. I felt a strange detachment, as if watching the scene unfold from a distance. The shock of the public revelation, the release of the secret, had left me numb, emotionally drained but strangely calm. He stood surrounded by police officers, his face pale and streaked with tears, his clothes disheveled, his carefully constructed image completely shattered. His friends, once enraged, now stood back, their faces a mixture of shame and disbelief. His parents remained huddled in their chairs, their weeping now silent, their bodies slumped in defeat. The restaurant manager, his face pale and strained, tried to explain the situation to the police, gesturing wildly towards the overturned tables and shattered glass. The police officers, their expressions impassive, listened intently, taking notes, assessing the scene. One of them approached me, his demeanor professional, but his eyes filled with concern. "Ma'am," he said, his voice calm and reassuring. "Are you all right? We received a call about a disturbance." My father stepped forward, his voice firm and protective. "Officer," he said. "This man," he gestured towards him, surrounded by police. "He assaulted my daughter, and she has allegations of abuse against him." The officer nodded, his expression becoming more serious. "Ma'am," he said, turning back to me, "would you be willing to come with us to the station to give a statement?" I nodded, my voice barely a whisper. "Yes," I said, "I will." My mother squeezed my hand, her eyes filled with love and support. "We'll go with you," she said. "We're not leaving you alone." The police led him away, his head bowed in shame, his shoulders slumped in defeat. He didn't look at me, didn't acknowledge my presence. He just walked, silently, defeated, towards the police car waiting outside. As he was led away, a strange sense of closure washed over me. It wasn't joy, not happiness, but a quiet sense of relief. The nightmare was finally over. The secret was out, and he was gone. The restaurant slowly began to empty, the curious onlookers dispersing, the stunned patrons leaving in hushed whispers. My parents and I followed the police out of the restaurant, leaving behind the wreckage of a ruined proposal, a shattered relationship, and a dark secret finally brought to light. Outside, the flashing lights of the police cars illuminated the street, casting long shadows that stretched and danced in the night. The cool night air was a welcome contrast to the stifling atmosphere of the restaurant. I took a deep breath, the fresh air filling my lungs, cleansing me, renewing me. As we got into the police car, I looked back at the restaurant, at the brightly lit windows, at the scene of the public humiliation and the dramatic revelation. It felt like a lifetime ago, yet it had only been hours. My life had changed irrevocably in those few hours. But as the police car pulled away, driving into the night, I didn't feel fear. I felt a strange sense of hope. A hope for a new beginning, a fresh start, a life free from secrets and lies, a life where I could finally be myself, truly and completely, without fear. The police station was a stark contrast to the opulent restaurant, a world of harsh fluorescent lights, linoleum floors, and the pervasive smell of disinfectant. The bustling energy of the restaurant was replaced by a quiet, almost oppressive stillness, broken only by the muffled sounds of telephones ringing and the occasional clatter of keyboards. We were led to a small, sterile interview room, furnished with a metal table and uncomfortable plastic chairs. The room felt cold, impersonal, and slightly intimidating. My parents sat beside me, their presence a comforting anchor in the unfamiliar environment. A female detective, Detective Miller, introduced herself, her demeanor professional and empathetic. She was a woman of about 40 with kind eyes and a calm, reassuring voice. She explained the process, outlining my rights, and assuring me that I was in a safe place. Then, she began to ask questions, gently probing, carefully documenting my statement. It was difficult, reliving the abuse, recounting the details of the secret I had kept hidden for so long. The words felt heavy, painful, like shards of glass tearing through my throat. But Detective Miller was patient, understanding, and supportive. She listened intently without judgment, creating a safe space for me to speak my truth. My parents listened too, their faces etched with pain and anger as they heard the details of my suffering. They had known something was wrong, they had sensed my unhappiness, but they had not known the full extent of the abuse, the depth of the secret I had been carrying. As I spoke, tears streamed down my face, releasing years of pent-up pain and fear. But with each tear, with each word, I felt a little lighter, a little stronger. The truth was painful, but it was also liberating. It was breaking the chains that had bound me for so long. Detective Miller took meticulous notes, her questions precise and focused, guiding me through the timeline of the abuse, documenting the patterns of behavior, gathering the evidence needed to build a case. The hours passed slowly, each minute feeling heavy with emotion and revelation. The sterile interview room became a crucible, forging a new version of myself, a stronger, more resilient version, forged in the fire of truth and pain. Finally, after hours of questioning, the interview was over. Detective Miller thanked me for my courage, for my willingness to speak out. She assured me that they would take my allegations seriously, that they would investigate thoroughly, and that they would do everything in their power to ensure my safety and justice. As we left the police station, stepping back into the cool night air, I felt exhausted, emotionally drained, but also strangely empowered. I had faced my fear. I had spoken my truth, and I had taken the first step towards healing and recovery. My parents put their arms around me, their love and support a tangible force, carrying me forward. We walked in silence, the city lights blurring around us, the weight of the secret finally lifted, replaced by a fragile sense of hope and a long road to healing ahead. The proposal had been a public spectacle of romantic illusion. The rejection had been a public declaration of truth. And the aftermath was the beginning of a new chapter, a chapter of healing, of recovery, and of finally living a life free from the shadows of a dark secret. The road ahead would be long and difficult, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was walking towards the light. The days that followed were a blur of legal proceedings, media attention, and the slow, painful process of healing. The story of the public proposal and the dramatic revelation of abuse became a media sensation splashed across newspapers and television screens. My name was everywhere, my face plastered on news websites, my story dissected and analyzed by strangers. It was overwhelming, intrusive, and deeply unsettling. But amidst the media frenzy, there was also an outpouring of support, of solidarity, from women who had experienced similar abuse, from strangers who were moved by my courage, from friends and family who rallied around me, offering love, support, and unwavering belief. My parents were my rock. their love and protection a constant source of strength. They shielded me from the worst of the media attention, navigated the legal complexities, and provided a safe haven where I could begin to heal. Therapy became my lifeline, a space where I could process the trauma, unpack the emotions, and rebuild my shattered sense of self. It was a long, arduous journey, filled with painful memories, difficult emotions, and moments of overwhelming despair. But slowly, gradually, with the support of my therapist, my family, and my friends, I began to piece myself back together. The legal proceedings were protracted and emotionally draining. He denied everything, painting himself as the victim, accusing me of fabricating the abuse, of seeking revenge for a broken engagement. His lawyers were aggressive, ruthless, and determined to discredit my testimony, to silence my voice, to protect their client. But I refused to be silenced. I stood my ground. I spoke my truth, and I refused to be intimidated. The trial was a public spectacle, a painful reenactment of the drama that had unfolded in the restaurant. But this time, it was my story, my truth, that was being told. And this time, I had the support of the legal system, the support of my community, and the unwavering support of my family. The verdict came after weeks of agonizing deliberation. Guilty. The word echoed in the courtroom, a moment of profound significance, a validation of my truth, a victory against abuse and silence. Justice, in its own slow and imperfect way, had been served. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. There was no instant happily ever after. The scars of the abuse remained. The trauma would take time to heal. But the verdict was a turning point, a moment of closure, a step towards a future free from fear and abuse. In the aftermath of the trial, I withdrew from the public eye, seeking solace and healing in the quiet sanctuary of my family and friends. I focused on my therapy, on rebuilding my life, on rediscovering myself beyond the trauma, beyond the secret, beyond the public spectacle. It was a slow, gradual process, a journey of self-discovery and self-acceptance. But with each step, with each day, I grew stronger, more resilient, more determined to live a life of my own making, a life filled with truth, with honesty, and with hope for a brighter future. The dark secret was finally behind me. The proposal had been a turning point, a moment of public humiliation and personal liberation, and the journey that followed, though painful and challenging, had led me to a place of strength, of healing, and of hope. The scars remained, but they were no longer wounds. They were reminders of my resilience, of my courage, of my survival. And they were a testament to the power of truth to set us free. Years passed. The media frenzy faded. The legal battles concluded, and life, in its relentless rhythm, moved forward. The scars of the past remained, faint lines etched into my soul, but they no longer defined me. They were a part of my story, a testament to my resilience, but not the whole story. I had rebuilt my life piece by painful piece, brick by hard-won brick. Therapy had been a long and arduous journey, but it had led me to a place of healing, of self-acceptance, and of inner peace. I had learned to forgive myself, to forgive him, not for his sake, but for my own. Forgiveness wasn't about condoning his actions, but about releasing myself from the chains of anger and resentment, about reclaiming my own emotional freedom. I had changed careers, pursuing a path that was more aligned with my values, working with organizations that supported victims of abuse, using my own experience to help others find their voice, their strength, and their path to healing. It was fulfilling, meaningful work, giving purpose to my pain, transforming my trauma into a source of strength and compassion. I had rebuilt my relationships, strengthening the bonds with my family and friends, forging new connections with people who understood and supported me, building a community of love and trust around me. And slowly, tentatively, I had begun to open myself up to the possibility of love again. It was scary, vulnerable, stepping back into the dating world, carrying the weight of my past, the fear of repeating the same patterns, the anxiety of trusting again. But I had learned to trust myself, to trust my intuition, to recognize the red flags, and to choose partners who were kind, respectful, and emotionally mature. It wasn't easy. There were setbacks, disappointments, and moments of doubt. But I persisted, driven by a deep-seated desire for connection, for intimacy, for a love that was healthy, supportive, and true. And then, one day, I met him. His name was David. He was kind, gentle, and patient. He listened without judgment. He supported without pressure. And he saw me, truly saw me, beyond the scars, beyond the trauma, beyond the public spectacle. He didn't know the details of my past when we first met, and I hesitated to share my story, fearing his reaction, fearing rejection, fearing judgment. But he was patient, understanding, and gently persistent, creating a safe space for me to open up, to share my vulnerability, to reveal the truth of my past. And when I finally told him my story, he didn't recoil, he didn't judge, he didn't run away. He listened, he held my hand, and he told me that he admired my strength, my courage, and my resilience. And in that moment, I knew that I had found something special, something real, something true. He proposed, years later, not in a crowded restaurant, not in a public spectacle, but in the quiet intimacy of our home, just the two of us, in the soft glow of candlelight. It was simple, heartfelt, and deeply meaningful. And this time, when I said yes, there were no dark secrets, no hidden fears, no lingering doubts. There was only love, trust, and a shared hope for a future together, a future built on honesty, respect, and unwavering support. The past would always be a part of my story, but it no longer defined me. I had survived, I had healed, and I had found love again. And in the quiet intimacy of that proposal, I knew that I was finally free. Free from the shadows of the past, free to embrace the future, free to live a life filled with love, joy, and unwavering hope. The dark secret was gone. The proposal was a promise of a new beginning.